So I'd like to thank all the panel one speakers and call upon the chair of our second panel, Drew King. That panel focused a little more on youth issues. Drew is on the board of Citizens for Public Schools, is doing a PhD dissertation at UMass Boston on community schools in New York City, and did his master's thesis on lack of recreation for youth in East Harlem. So Drew, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Dad. My father was my first Cambridge youth soccer coach on the light blue team. It's Senate Park. Yeah, so my name's Drew. I know a lot of you, and thanks so much for the previous speakers. It's incredible to hear about all these green warriors in our city I didn't even know about. These unsung heroes who are preserving our precious park and green space. Cambridge parks have definitely always been a refuge for me, whether it's walking along the river, Magazine Beach, JFK Park, Fresh Pond, and so on and so forth. I grew up in Cambridge youth sports, playing, Cambridge youth soccer, community basketball leagues, and these all shaped my social life and formed deep friendships with young people from different racial and economic backgrounds. And I definitely think it's a serious issue which Quentin and others have raised, that we're losing open green space due to overdevelopment and gentrification, all these processes, especially when so much research, right, shows that all the health and community benefits of green space in our cities. And I think talking about now shifting towards open spaces, places of youth recreation is particularly important, especially in the wake of a recent spike in youth violence in our city. Decades of research have showed that quality youth athletic and recreation programs improve young people's physical and mental health, as well as their academic performance, while at the same time helping them to avoid violence and not be drawn into antisocial behaviors, not drop out of school, and so on. And I started to hear from some people even recently, I don't remember where, that in the wake of recent incidents, young folks or families weren't going to the local parks. And this is a link we got to make. If a local park or playground or field or court is perceived as unsafe by families, youth won't be allowed to go out and play sports, or they'll avoid those spaces. That also contributes to health epidemics, childhood obesity, et cetera. So without further ado, I think we got two of our panelists here. Larry is late from another event. We got Ayesha Wilson, who's an incredible Cambridge School Committee member, a product of the Cambridge school system, has over 18 years of experience in human services and youth work. And she's really been one of the most passionate leaders and advocates for youth voice and family empowerment in the city. And also Susan Ruff, who all of us know that Cambridge Youth Soccer has been a real pillar of the Cambridge community. So Susan Ruff is the executive director of Cambridge Youth Soccer, a longtime community leader and an advocate for youth sports. So Ayesha, I'll let you give us your comments first. If you want to talk about how you approach this issue from the school committee and as a Cambridge Public School student advocate.
Great, thank you, Drew, and thank you to everyone, not only for being here, but to hosting this event and this conversation. It is critically important and obviously something that we must not overlook in terms of how our city is continuing to build and thrive in so many different ways, but we can't leave our green spaces and our parks and our infrastructure around environmental justice behind. That must be a part of the movement as well. I myself also just came from the Bob Moses celebration of life with many other colleagues that are on this call. And it was just a beautiful celebration and a beautiful moment of just his legendary service and commitment to equity and justice and commitment to young people especially. And so just starting off with Dr. Bob Moses and thinking about his work, and the renaming of the Area 4 Youth Center to the Moses Youth Center. I think that happened back in 2017 under, I think the motion or resolution came forth by former Vice Mayor Dennis Benzon. And it's very fitting, right, for the community to have a space and to know the work of the Moses family, specifically Bob Moses, and the work that he did around our community, our work, our young people, specifically around math, but just in so many other places around equity and justice. And so just really wanted to bringing him into the space and centering his work, but also thinking about where the youth center actually sits, and it sits at Senate Park. And Senate Park is known to so many young people, whether you're playing basketball, if you're there for a picnic, if you're there to play some pickup volleyball games and all sorts of other wonderful things. Our schools have used that space for lunches, the Cambridgeport School through this COVID pandemic, and so much more. I mean, kids, you know, the daycares, they use it for their field trips and their playtime. The Prospect Hill Academy, they use it for their recess space also. And so that is just a legendary space and something that we always must keep tight and keep hold of. It's undergoing construction right now. And during this time, it has been pretty challenging in terms of what does that look like as we want to lift those spaces for so many opportunities for kids to play, for lunchtime to still happen while we are in somewhat of a pandemic, as we're seeing ourselves maybe getting through it, but knowing that having lunches outdoors and kids being able to run and play is definitely a beautiful thing to do. And that space is just center to so many schools and needed for those opportunities. So I just wanted to lift that up. Cambridge is home to 70 parks across the city, and that is an amazing thing. Some of these parks, like Danahy, that I grew up in North Cambridge and didn't know that Danahy actually was a dump, right? It was a dump that sat around 5 different housing developments, all right? So when you think about where people live and the dump that was around them, you really want to think about, then they created this green space for families to then enjoy, to play, for kids to do their soccer, and just engage in so many community-like opportunities. And that was really big. One thing that happened over the COVID pandemic is Elevate Youth. And I don't know if any of you all know about Elevate Youth, but they're a Boston-based organization, but they do a lot of outdoor nature engaging with young people, and in partnership with the mayor's office, Mayor Siddiqui, our MIT Government Relations Department, and the Housing Authority, Cambridge Housing Authority's workforce program that I am a staff member of, we were able to come together and engage young people, specifically 4th and 5th graders, in that community to play over in Danahy Park as an after school kind of space. And they were able to engage and use that space 2 days a week. And what we know from that is that, one, young people wanted to be outdoors and they wanted to engage. And so that was necessary. And 2, that families, if you're in a trusted space with trusted adults, they will want their kids to be with you, right? And so that was really important during this time to think about how we are elevating our spaces, our green spaces, those parks, and actually bringing learning to those spaces. And so I remember going on a visit with Mayor Siddiqui and a couple of her staff members and watching the young people tie knots to make a tent. And this day it was drizzling. And so they were creating a tent to create shelter for themselves and protect themselves from the rain. And it was beautiful in terms of how they were learning how to build the knots, how they were participating in teamwork and youth engagement and the social emotional skills that they were building during this time. And this just put like a light bulb in my head, like this needs to happen more, right? And how are we engaging?
1 minute, sorry.
Thank you. How are we engaging more and more of our young people to actually play, do social emotional learning, do the math through math talks and other engaging opportunities like that. And how we're having a sense of community, how we're building our community health. What does it look like when we're thinking of crime in our communities, especially specifically in the in the port area, we know that crime has been heavy in those areas, but what does it mean to have green spaces that are well maintained, right? So that if the green space looks pretty and it's well kept, crime will be reduced, right? And we need to make sure that that is something that we're honing in on and that we're encouraging our community to take part in. And that's for safe gatherings. And we want to make sure that individuals can see their young people and say, hey, go out and play. Because I know that that's something for me as a kid. My mother would say, go outside and play. But maybe to many of the families in the poor area, they can't really say that because there's so much gun violence right now. So I just wanted to lift that up. And then understanding that parks are free, right? So parks do not cost a thing. And so engaging and going for a field trip and fun and celebrating, whether it's a birthday or any kind of celebration, you know, families are out there and they're out in the parks and they are hanging out. Or just individuals. I mean, I see young adults that just go for a picnic and they play some little soccer or they play, you know, volleyball or play frisbee. So there's so many opportunities for young people to engage in parks, for older people to engage in parks. And so keeping our green spaces alive, well maintained, and well supported throughout our community is big. And even as we hone into affordable housing and what does that look like, we want to make sure that our affordable housing spaces are close to parks so that those families have a place to play and engage and enjoy the community with their young people as well. It's a great way to make new friendships, right? A kid will be out there and meet up with another young person and boom, you all become buddies and now you all figure out a day to always come to the park. So I know my time is short. I'm here for questions and all that stuff, but I want to just say thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this space and just say, you know, it's really important that we're keeping our green spaces safe, clean, and, you know, and well maintained so that the community can thrive using it, learning a lot about nature, math, science, so many different things that you can do around just learning when it comes to parks. So again, thank you for this time. I feel like I'm missing something. I am missing something, that my colleagues on the school committee passed a motion to create green spaces, to create more open spaces for our young people to engage in. And that was back in the fall last year. And that was a big deal, right? When our schools had shut down and kids weren't in schools as regularly, we wanted to make sure kids were able to still enjoy and engage. And it was important that we utilized our green spaces for that. So I know my time is up. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, School Committee Member Wilson. I really appreciate all those incredible insights. Next up, we're gonna have Susan Ruff. And Susan, if you can just talk to us about the state of Cambridge youth soccer and state of and the needs, and the needs for youth sports right now.
All right. Hi, everybody. I know so many of you through Cambridge Youth Soccer. And thank you, Jonathan and Drew, for inviting me to speak on behalf of Cambridge Youth Soccer. We love green spaces. We want more green spaces. We want more green spaces in more parts of the city. We had to shut down our programming in the spring of 2020 because of COVID, but we were able to start back up last fall. And we didn't have a huge group playing last fall, but people were happy to be out there because it was one of the few times kids were seeing their friends again because schools were closed. Then last spring, we had more players playing than, I've been the director for 18 years, and more players than I've ever seen in Cambridge Youth Soccer. So it's great, the program is growing. This fall, we're reaching almost 1,500 players. I think we're 4 kids short of 1,500 players. So it's just fantastic. But that means we need places for those kids to play, not just for our organized practices and games, but we encourage the kids to go out and play pickup soccer with their friends. That makes you a better soccer player, and it's a lot of fun. We work with the Department of Recreation and the DPW on getting fields and keeping the fields usable. We have 10 fields that are permitted for soccer this fall. We've got 1,500 players. That's not much. And one problem is so many of the fields are over in West and North Cambridge. if you come to Danahy Park on a Saturday this fall, you'll see all of our 3rd and 8th graders playing at the same, not on the same field, but at the same facility. And it's fantastic. Come see it. We have really worked hard to increase the diversity of the program. And when we saw that we were missing, we didn't have a lot of players from Fletcher Maynard or Kennedy Longfellow. We had pizza party events over there and discounted codes specific to the school. And that worked. And that got kids from the schools into Cambridge Youth Soccer, but families have a problem getting their kids across the city on a Wednesday afternoon to a practice. So we're always advocating for more fields in East Cambridge. I know Senate will be nice when it's done, but it's a real blow to us that we can't use it. That's one of our most popular fields in the center there. And when I drive by now or bike by, and we can't use it this fall, but they haven't started construction. So that is frustrating. And it was very interesting to hear previous speakers talking about Magazine Beach, which their fields, well, we started 2 weeks ago. We have not gotten a permit to play there yet because I think the communication with the DCR and the Department of Rec is not a good one. And there's always a delay with that. So we want good. I often advocate for artificial turf fields because we can use them throughout the year, but I love grass fields. I love grass fields that are well maintained, and our kids love playing on grass. So I'm here to advocate for keeping Cambridge as green as possible and maybe getting a full-size soccer field somewhere other than West and North Cambridge. That would be a great thing for the city, I think, and for the kids of the city. And I don't think I need my whole 5 or 6 minutes, but I'm happy to take questions and look forward to working with people on getting more green spaces here.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
Larry Ward, who a lot of you should know, if you don't know, I think he was waiting to give remarks at another event. I don't think he's here. Larry's, been a leading advocate for Cambridge youth in public schools in our city for decades. He's an election commissioner, executive producer of the Cambridge Jazz Festival, which you don't know about, you got to check it out. And I think it's really rejuvenated the whole arts and cultural landscape over the last 6 or 7 years in the city. Ayesha and Susan touched on so much. We're going to open it up to comments and questions. I like how you both emphasize it's not just about having open space, but it has to be well maintained. It has to be safe. It has to have lights. If young people want to utilize it at nighttime, you want to have organized sports and recreation programs. And I'm curious, just like an open space survey was done, to see sort of a youth recreation survey in this city. To what extent, right, are all the different agencies that are often school playgrounds and school gyms are closed, right, in the evenings and weekends? Yeah, maybe this exists. A Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights. Thank you, Julie. But these are can be high risk hours for adolescents when you're talking about weekday nights and weekends. And to what extent are we maximizing the use of existing facilities and outdoor parks? I remember growing up when I had friends who would get kicked out of the MIT gym. We just wanted a place to play ball. It must have been getting cold at those times, and they get chased out, by security guards. So as you all know, in our cities, it's always a challenge to just have enough recreational space.
I live a block from Senate Park and have been a little bit involved in the neighborhood concerns about closing it for a year and a half or a year and a quarter for renovation. So my question is, how can we improve the city's process around the public parks to get public input on the programming and use of parks, the maintenance, the plantings, and renovations? We're going to spend a lot of money on Senate Park, but I've talked to a lot of people who say, well, this part of it's not necessary, certainly compared to the need to use the park. or they like some parts, but they don't like some parts. But people don't even know, most of the people that I talk to don't even know what's planned for the park. Now all they know is that it's going to be closed, partly closed for some period of time. And the reason why it's partly closed is because the schools and neighbors push back on the city. But where's the proactive process, city process to get that input to start with?
You're absolutely right, Lee. And there's very little proactive planning going on. It's almost always reactive in every way. And one of the things I'm going to say at the end, which you're not going to hear now, is that most of the open space initiatives are neighborhood sponsored, are neighborhoods pushing. So the city is finally going to do an open space plan. They didn't use those words, but they're going to explore what is needed in open spaces. And I think we can bring all this up, but if all 50 people on this discussion got active in this, that would have quite an impact. And you're absolutely right on your premise that neighbors have to be invested in what happens in the parks, design, construction, and programming. We can do it. This is the beginning of that, I think.
Thanks, Drew. When I was younger, growing up in Brooklyn, all the Brooklyn schools, the gyms stayed open till pretty late, 6 o'clock. That was very, very important, right? In the wintertime, you go use the school gym. And in my early days here in Cambridge, now things may have changed, coaching youth basketball teams and things like that. I was quite distressed to discover that when school closed, the gym closed, and that we couldn't access. And the gym was sitting there. It's wintertime; kids can't play outside. And during the time that I was involved in that, we never solved that problem. Is that still the policy, that when the academic day ends, the gym closes, right? And I was told it was a matter of, you'd have to pay $60 an hour for for a custodian. Well, that's not a lot of money if 20 kids can use the facility. So I'm still interested in the question of whether we could open up school facilities for a longer time. So Ayesha, that's to you.
Thank you for that question, Jonathan. I would think our youth centers is also a place that is closed during the times when our schools technically are closed, I believe. And so I'm going to write that question down and ask and talk to Ellen Seminoff and Michelle Farnham. And I'm sure my colleagues on the city council can maybe push for that, right? Like when schools close down, what does it look like? I know some programming still happens, but not necessarily for the team program. So like the late night, just kind of shooting and playing ball and just kind of hanging out. So what might that look like? And what resources could we put in play so that young people can still engage and get outdoors and get into a safe to kind of let loose and hang out and play some ball. So I don't know if anybody on the city council has anything else to add to that. But I think that's definitely something I'm noting.
Let me just say one complication, at least I used to be on the Area 4 Youth Center Advisory Board, is that the school budget, the school gyms come out of the school budget, but the youth centers didn't come out of the school budget, right? That came out of Department of, Social Services. So
right.
It was very hard to navigate getting basketball courts between the school and youth center because they were under different administrative structures, and I believe they still are. So if you don't,
yes, they definitely are. They definitely are. So, and I think in terms of our schools being open, even like just for our gym spaces, even when our schools are down. I mean, again, that's a good question to raise and bring up. I know there's a lot of just logistics around. It's one thing to have custodians on staff to just kind of maintain the space, but it will be another thing to have adult supervision and who would be the adults to be on staff during those times. So why I'm thinking like the youth centers, because we have 5 of them across our city and they're pretty strategically positioned in every I want to say borough, but in every section of our city, that if our youth centers could be open and that we're more intentional there, that would probably be the better. But I'm curious. I will still raise the question because I think that it's an important one to raise, but I know it would be a staffing issue and just like contracts of like who's actually going to be in those spaces to keep it open, make sure it's safe.
Yeah, thanks, Ayesha, for that answer. I completely agree. And in fact, I'm working on a policy order asking the city manager to keep the youth centers open later and on weekends because currently they're closed, and that's just crazy to me. I am aware of this, budgetary split where the school buildings are funded through the school budget, at least operationally, and the youth centers are through the Department of Human Services. But frankly, that's our problem. That shouldn't in any way prevent or limit, resident access to these facilities. So we absolutely have to do better on that front, and I will continue to push on that issue.
This is Patrick Barton.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's how it comes up. Yeah, I'm sort of piggybacking on Jonathan's question, and Dennis has had his ears bent by me on this, and Alicia, you can listen to, is the city is spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on beautiful new schools, and that's a really great thing. It's the right thing to do. The school year is 180 days. That's less than half the year. To spend hundreds of millions of dollars on schools and then not try to figure out how to use them as many hours and as many days of the year is just not good thinking. I would rather have them spend $50 million less on a school and take that money and figure out how they can do community programming in a school. I belong to a union. I believe in unions. My mother was a school teacher in Somerville. The schools belong to the schools department, and the children and the teachers. That's their very first highest priority. That being said, the city is building schools that wealthy private colleges would envy the quality of the building and the planning and what they have. And we really need to figure out a way how we can let the school department hold the reins, but yet encourage them to share it with the rest of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Just quickly, we're talking about environmental justice and, youth having access to green spaces, which I totally, agree with. And I wanted to mention that some of the residents in kind of the lower part of the port near Cherry and Pine and School Street and Eaton Street are, we have a petition basically asking for more open space because we have so little and we have so many youth in the neighborhood. And this is for Margaret Fuller Neighborhood House, which has a parking lot they're planning to sell or convert for development. And, rather than more buildings, we're asking them as neighbors to make that into a park space that, as people mentioned, can be supervised because they have a youth program there, youth workers. And so we have a petition if anyone wants to look at that, read it, or potentially sign it, they can go. I put in the chat my email, but we are looking at environmental justice. There's a lot more affordable housing that will be coming in, and it'll probably be very family oriented. So having more places where youth can go that might be supervised, like the space near Margaret Fuller, where we think would be a good win-win for the neighborhood and for the Margaret Fuller House as well. So please check out the petition. And I put as I said, my email in the chat. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dorothy. Kate?
You may have addressed it before I was able to join this afternoon's meeting, but I've been troubled by the the factions that seem to be pitting affordable housing versus green space, as if green space was a luxury. And we realize both are needed, but it seems to me that the forceful leaders in these areas need to see to it that both are happening, not one versus the other.
Yes.
Particularly in terms of city policy and funds. We really don't need more labs and fancy office and luxury apartment space, even though they seem appealing to somebody who's interested in whether that gives us a bigger tax base. But it's delusional thinking. You know, you just, it's a cruelty beyond words to have affordable housing pitted against green space.
Thanks.
Excuse me for being so
Lastly,
emotional.
we'll take Shelly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, as one who has observed the comings and going around Donnelly Field all summer and during COVID, there seems to be some very complicated coordination that happens between the city departments. There's, you know, Department of Human Services runs after-school programs there. The schools use it during the day when school is in session for kids to be outdoors. In the summertime, and even, you know, until just this week, I think the Gold Star pool has been open and functioning really remarkably well, with lots of people using it. And it would be nice to see some reporting by the city about how that's accomplished and whether the participants feel it's successful. You know, we're calling, what I'm asking for is a little more reporting about how things function and whether they could be better or not. One thing is that a lot of people who don't have parks nearby seem to drive by, and there's a lot of congestion on the street from cars because people are dropping their children off or dropping, you know, people off to go to the park. So all of that, I respect, you know, I appreciate the amount of coordination that's needed from the city, but it would be nice for the residents of the city to know whether that's successful or not.
Thank you, Shelly. Right. No, so thanks so much for all your comments. It's obviously a very important dialogue. Seems like we have the beginnings of a new working group or a new movement around not just expanding open space and parks for youth, but also expanding usage of existing recreational facilities and spaces. And how do we do that? Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, everybody.